It was a sunny Saturday morning when everything changed. I was in the kitchen folding laundry, sipping coffee, and listening to the usual neighborhood buzz through the open window. My 12-year-old daughter, Lily, was upstairs in her room, drawing as she always did, lost in her world of colors and imagination. Born deaf, Lily never let a hold her back. She was smart, creative, and fiercely independent. She wore a cochlear implant during the day, but often took it off at home, especially when she needed peace to focus on her art. That morning, she had taken it off. Our home sat in a tidy suburban cul-de-sac managed by the infamous local HOA. They called themselves the Preservation Committee, but we all knew who really ran the show: Karen Miller, the president. Middle-aged, overly entitled, and never without her clipboard, Karen had turned neighborly oversight into something closer to a dictatorship. The week before, Karen had sent us a violation notice, something about unauthorized color paint samples left on our porch. It was just a few swatches Lily had painted on a board for an art project, but Karen saw it as a visual disturbance. I'd ignored it. We all ignored Karen's petty threats. Then, that morning, she came to our door. I didn't hear the knock. Neither did Lily. I was in the back of the house. Karen, as later shown on our porch camera, stood waiting for 23 seconds. She knocked again more aggressively and looked into the windows. Then she lost it. In the footage, Karen stormed off our porch, only to return 2 minutes later with a firearm. My stomach still turns at the thought. She had a concealed carry license and apparently a terrible temper. When the shot rang out, I thought it was a car backfiring. Then I heard the scream. I ran to the front door. There, on the stairs, Lily was sprawled, motionless, blood seeping into her sky blue shirt. Karen stood frozen with the gun still raised, her face twisted in anger and confusion. She didn't answer, she shouted. I thought she was ignoring me. That was her excuse. But my little girl never heard the knock. The moment I saw Lily lying there, my heart shattered into pieces I could never put back together. I dropped to my knees beside her, trembling hands reaching for her wrist, a pulse faint but there. Her eyes were barely open and her lips moved, but no sound came out. I screamed for help. Neighbors began pouring out of their homes. Some stood frozen. Others pulled out phones. A few ran over to help, horrified. But Karen, she just stood there, still holding the gun. Her lips moved rapidly as she tried to explain herself, but no one wanted to hear it. She wasn't supposed to be there, she insisted. I thought someone was inside, ignoring me on purpose. You know how disrespectful that is. I didn't respond. My world had narrowed to Lily bleeding on the porch. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They pushed past Karen, who was still ranting. The officer who followed handcuffed her on the spot. I'm the HOA president, she cried, as if that gave her immunity from justice. But no badge, no title, no clipboard in the world could undo what she'd done. As the ambulance sped away, I followed, my hands stained with Lily's blood. My wife met us at the hospital, pale and shaking. I could hardly speak. The doctor told us Lily had been hit in the side. The bullet missed vital organs by inches. It was a miracle she survived. She'll need surgery, he said gently, but she's stable. She's strong. I nodded, unable to process the relief. That night, I sat beside Lily's hospital bed, watching her chest rise and fall. I remembered how she used to play on those very porch steps with sidewalk chalk and bubbles. That place was supposed to be safe. Home was supposed to be safe. But Karen, the woman we'd seen at block parties, who passed out HOA newsletters like she was handing out scripture, had shattered all of that. And all because my daughter couldn't hear her knock? That wasn't an accident. It was negligence, entitlement, and rage, wrapped in a badge of fake authority. And I was going to make sure the world knew it. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. News trucks lined the street. Reporters with long mics and serious faces stood outside my home, speaking into cameras. Somehow, despite everything, the story was already being spun, and not in our favor. She thought there was an intruder, one anchor said. A tragic misunderstanding, another murmured. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power-drunk woman with a gun and no patience. Karen's lawyer made a public statement claiming she acted out of fear. According to her, Karen knocked, saw movement inside, and believed someone was hiding. When no one answered, she feared for her safety and opened fire because she thought someone was about to ambush her. Ambush? My 12-year-old daughter? The HOA board didn't help. In fact, they issued a press release claiming Karen had repeatedly warned the family about code violations, as if that somehow justified what she did. They said our property had been non-compliant for weeks and that Karen was conducting official HOA business at the time of the incident. It was disgusting. While my daughter lay in a hospital bed with a tube in her side and stitches holding her together, Karen was being painted as the victim. Some of our neighbors even nodded along, whispering that maybe we should have just answered the door. But Lily couldn't. That's the point. She didn't have her cochlear implant on. She couldn't hear a knock or a voice. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't defiant. She was just drawing, just being a child in her own home. I decided then I wasn't going to stay quiet. I reached out to a lawyer and then a local advocate for disabled rights. I showed them the security camera footage from our porch. It clearly captured Karen's knock, her angry muttering, her pacing, and then her return with a firearm. The moment she raised it, the flash, the instant Lily collapsed. We uploaded the video online, and within hours it went viral. People saw what really happened, and the narrative changed fast. Sympathy shifted. Outrage grew. Karen wasn't the victim. She was the aggressor, and I was just getting started. The internet did what it does best, it roared. Within a day, the video had reached over 2 million views. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Lily and hashtag HOA Karen began trending on Twitter and TikTok. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities reposted the footage, expressing outrage and disbelief. This isn't just negligence, one tweet read. This is ableism. This is gun violence. This is abuse of power. Local news shifted their coverage fast. Reporters now asked hard questions, not about my family, but about Karen, the HOA, and the police response. Why was someone allowed to roam a neighborhood with a firearm over a property violation? Why was a deaf child, nearly killed for not hearing a knock? Lily remained unconscious for 2 days after the surgery. Her body was healing, but slowly. I stayed by her side, every minute holding her hand and waiting for her eyes to open. Meanwhile, Karen had posted bail and gone home. Yes, she'd been arrested, charged with assault with a deadly weapon and reckless endangerment, but the system still protected her. She had money, influence, and the HOA board behind her. But not for long. Once the video spread, other neighbors began speaking out. Quietly at first, then louder. Stories about Karen's harassment, her threats, her history of singling out families with kids or disabilities. One mother admitted Karen fined her for her autistic son's therapy swing in their backyard. Another family said Karen reported them for noise pollution when their toddler cried too much. And then the HOA whistleblower came forward. An anonymous email landed in my inbox. Attached were PDFs, meeting minutes, and internal complaints from board members, all documenting Karen's behavior. Some had raised concerns about her temper and obsession with power. One even warned, Karen is unhinged. If this continues, someone will get hurt. That email was a bombshell. I handed everything to my lawyer. He smiled for the first time since we met. This, he said, is going to bury her. But I didn't just want Karen buried in legal battles. I wanted change. Because this wasn't just about Lily. This was about every child with a disability who's ever been ignored, blamed, or hurt. Karen had tried to silence my daughter. But now, the world was listening. The moment Lily opened her eyes, I broke down. It was early morning. The sun poured through the hospital blinds in quiet golden streaks, and her fingers twitched before her eyelids fluttered. I leaned over her bed, barely breathing. Then her eyes opened, slow, confused, and she blinked up at me. She was back. Dad? She signed weakly, her hands trembling. Tears spilled down my face as I gently caught her fingers. I signed back. You're safe now. I'm here. I never left. She looked down at the bandages wrapped around her side and winced. The pain registered on her face. Her hands hesitated. Did something happen? She signed, still groggy. I nodded. You were shot, baby. But you're going to be okay. Shock spread slowly across her face. She remembered pieces. The knock, the sudden pain, the flash, but mostly she remembered the fear. Why? She asked. I swallowed hard. Because someone didn't understand that you couldn't hear her. Lily turned away. Her small shoulders trembled. It was the first time I saw her truly afraid, not of physical pain, but of the world outside. My heart ached deeper than I thought possible. Later that day, a psychologist came to evaluate her. The trauma was real, but Lily was strong. She'd faced challenges all her life. This was just another mountain, a cruel, senseless one, but one she would climb. Meanwhile, the hospital turned into a fortress of love. Cards, flowers, gifts, they arrived in droves. Hundreds, then thousands. A sketchbook from a deaf school in Canada. A teddy bear from a veteran in Texas who had lost his hearing in combat. A letter from a little girl in Ohio who wrote, "You're my hero." Lily read every message. She smiled for the first time since waking up. Outside, a protest had begun. Families from across the state rallied at our HOA's main office, holding signs that read, "HOA is not above the law and protect disabled children." They chanted Lily's name. They demanded Karen's removal. And Lily saw it all on the news, stunned, then proud. "You fought for me?" she signed. I shook my head. "No, sweetie. We fought. And now the world's fighting too." By the end of the week, Karen could no longer walk outside without cameras following her every step. She was swarmed outside her house. Protesters stood on her lawn with signs. Reporters camped outside her driveway. Even her own neighbors had begun to turn on her. Those who once stayed silent now whispered openly, "She went too far." She finally snapped. It could have been any of our kids. But Karen wasn't apologizing. In fact, she doubled down. Through her attorney, she released another statement, cold and calculated. She claimed she had reason to believe the home was occupied by hostile individuals and that she feared for her life. She painted herself as the protector of the neighborhood, saying she took action because law enforcement wasn't fast enough. She never once mentioned Lily by name. That night, we held a press conference. It was the hospital's idea, a way to share Lily's story in her own words, or in her own signs. She sat beside me, pale but composed, her hands steady as she translated her emotions through ASL. I spoke for her aloud, sentence by sentence, so the world would hear. I was at home drawing. I didn't hear the knock. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't dangerous. She shot me because I'm deaf. Because I didn't answer her fast enough. The silence from the press afterward was deafening. Some reporters cried. Others put their mics down. That moment, that pure, simple truth, broke whatever defense Karen thought she had left. The very next day, the police reclassified the charge. The DA announced that Karen would be charged not only with felony assault, but attempted murder. A civil rights investigation was also launched, focused on hate crimes and abuse of authority. Then came the real shock, for members of the HOA board resigned. In their resignation letter, they admitted they'd been afraid of Karen for years, that she'd bullied, manipulated, and threatened them, that they enabled her out of fear. But no longer. That morning, the HOA was dissolved. And Karen? She was arrested again. No bail this time. No shield. She was finally facing the world. And for once, the world wasn't letting her look away. The courtroom was packed. Camera crews lined the back wall. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder with citizens, activists, and families from around the state, many wearing shirts that read, "I stand with Lily." The courtroom had to open a second overflow room with live stream access. Everyone wanted to see what justice would look like. Karen entered wearing a gray pantsuit, the same smug expression on her face she always had at HOA meetings. But this time, there was no clipboard in her hand, just handcuffs. Her lawyer tried to argue it was all a tragic miscommunication, that Karen had no history of violence, that she was under stress, trying to protect the community, but they weren't prepared for what came next. The prosecutor brought in the porch camera footage. Frame by frame, the jury watched Karen knock, pace, mutter angrily to herself, and then return armed and fire. Then they played Lily's video testimony. She sat, brave and calm, in front of a white background. She signed clearly, while an interpreter translated her words. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't wait. She just saw someone different and got scared. It was devastating. And then came the surprise witness, one of Karen's former HOA board members, who finally testified under oath. She revealed how Karen bragged about putting people in their place, how she called families with special needs liabilities, how she once said, "If people can't follow the rules, they don't belong here." That sealed it. The jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of reckless endangerment, guilty of hate-motivated violence. Karen's face finally cracked when the judge denied her leniency. She was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Lily squeezed my hand as the gavel struck. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted into cheers, not because of revenge, but because, for once, the system had listened. To a child, to a deaf girl who had been ignored, then hurt just for existing. The nightmare had finally ended, but our mission, that had only just begun. Because Lily wanted to make sure this never happened to anyone else. Ever again. A year passed. Lily healed, not just physically but emotionally. The scar on her side faded, but the memory never would. Still, she refused to let it define her. If anything, it made her stronger, bolder. She started painting again, but her art changed. It became louder, more expressive, entire canvases filled with colors that screamed, even in silence. One painting in particular went viral. A portrait of herself on the porch steps, hands raised in the air, a swirl of colors exploding behind her. She titled it, "I Heard You Without Sound." We framed that piece in our living room. The incident had reshaped our lives. After the trial, Lily was invited to speak and sign at schools, disability advocacy events, and even state conferences. She became a face for change, not out of choice, but out of courage. She stood for children like her, who had been overlooked, underestimated, or endangered simply for being different. Together, we started a foundation. The Lily Listens Project, dedicated to raising awareness about the deaf community and promoting laws that protect disabled individuals from discrimination and violence. Donations poured in. Politicians took notice. Even Congress discussed new HOA accountability legislation, unofficially dubbed Lily's Law. Karen was long gone, serving her sentence in silence. No more HOAs to boss around. No more power. She had become a cautionary tale. Our neighborhood changed, too. A new community council was formed, not just for rule enforcement, but for unity. Residents planted a small memorial garden by the steps where Lily had fallen. A plaque stood beside the roses, in honor of Lily, who taught us to listen with more than ears. She visited the garden one afternoon, hands in her jacket, eyes scanning the plaque. She signed softly, "That's me." I nodded. "That's you." She smiled, not a small one, but a real one. The kind of smile that told me she wasn't afraid anymore. That day, we walked home hand in hand, past neighbors who waved with more warmth than ever before, past a world that had once been too loud and too blind, but was finally learning how to see, how to listen, and how to love better. And my daughter? She never had to hear the door again to make the world listen. She had already opened it.